Hello, my name's Harriet Hill. I'm a Trauma Healing Institute director, and I'd like to talk about responding immediately after a disaster. Disasters happen without warning. How can we be prepared to respond? And what kind of response is really appropriate when people have just gone through a disaster? This is an especially relevant topic in the US today because just yesterday, there was another school shooting in Florida with 17 children killed and many, many people affected by this trauma. So what are the people, the facilitators around that area going to do? First of all, there's a preparation in advance. As you train facilitators in an equipping session, try to include the lesson 11A, responding immediately after a disaster. This will give people already an orientation before the disaster strikes so that they're able to mobilize more quickly when it does. Secondly, immediately after the disaster, as it says in that lesson, you need to organize people and bring them together. And this might be with other organizations distributing physical help like tents or food or water. It might be with the existing facilitators in the area, if there are some. And it might be with those other volunteers for other agencies that have no exposure in trauma healing, but will be exposed to trauma, so they need to understand how that might affect them. And they may be listening to stories. The disaster response experts say there is a time to lay down your hammer and listen to people, to let them tell their stories. And so those relief volunteers could benefit from some exposure to trauma healing and perhaps get more training later. Now, the survivors themselves, there are 3 levels of response that we have. First of all, for people who are extremely traumatized, they will not be able to do much. They may not even be ready to tell their story, but you can listen. You can just let them tell as much or as little as they're ready to do. But be a listening ear. It can help even from the beginning, and we've had experiences where people have said, this kept me from committing suicide. Even though you came very soon after the disaster, it was helpful even immediately. Often you could leave, we have this postcard, which was first developed in Ecuador after the earthquake there some years ago. And it might be all that a survivor can handle, but a picture of something beautiful, something orderly in the middle of chaos, the chaos of the disaster, and a very short Bible verse. We know we love the Bible, but at this point in time, maybe something very short and encouraging is about all they could really handle and might be most appropriate. On the back of the postcard, there are how people respond to disaster, what is normal, to help people know they are not going crazy. This is a normal response. And then things they can do to help themselves heal and things they should avoid doing. So just talking, listening to people, the survivors, leaving them with this as a reminder of what you've said. A second level of response, and this might be later, for people, or for people who are not as traumatized by the disaster, is this leaflet. It contains some scripture passages, more scripture passages, and it has these sections which I'd like to read out with you. And you can go over this with individuals or with small groups if this is the appropriate response for them. First steps, what do you do immediately? The second part is, why am I feeling this way? Again, helping them understand the guilt, the shame, the normal trauma reactions of reliving, avoiding, being on alert all the time, helping them to get a handle on those feelings that are pumping through their bodies. The next section is how to calm strong emotions if they are beginning to feel overwhelmed, doing the breathing exercise, container exercise, or other exercises there, just ways to stabilize. Then, why am I feeling so sad? Helping them understand grief, the effect of grief on them, and the 3 villages, how to go through those and be patient with themselves and those around them. Then the next section is, how can my heart wounds heal? And that's about telling their story. And in this context, with disaster survivors, stressing that they need to find safe people to tell their stories to, because sometimes there are news reporters or volunteers or Christians even who want to pressure them for testimonies or to speak. And so really making sure they find a safe place when they are ready to tell their story to a person who they feel comfortable with, also including the art exercise, and then stimulating them if the survivor may also be one to listen to those around them in their family or in their community. So giving them those 3 questions that we are so fond of: what happened, how did it make you feel, and what was the hardest part? The final section is how do I pray in this situation, and really talking about laments. And you're familiar with the lament exercises and the role of laments and how to do them and all of that. So then the next steps, it closes with next steps, and that would be an invitation for this survivor to join a healing group. And they won't be able to do that right away. They'll need some distance on the experience, but when the dust settles, and we can't say how many months that is, but maybe 3 months, 6 months, might be appropriate for some people. But when they're ready, to invite them to go through Healing the Wounds of Trauma, a healing group, and process their experience on a deeper level. So these things are available on our Trauma Healing Institute site. If you have any questions, contact Trauma Healing Institute. You will be discovering things. This is all a work in progress, so we want to hear from you what you are discovering, and I hope that this is helpful to you. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.